In this video, I'll show you exactly how we booked one of our clients 21 calls in 21 days using cold email. Because whether you like it or not, cold email is still one of the best ways to book calls. It's consistent, it's scalable, and it doesn't take 6 months to get running just like paid ads. But that's obviously only if you know what you're doing. And that's why I'm going to walk you through this entire case study. I'm going to go over how we built the lead list, the email copy that we wrote, and I'm even going to share how we stayed out of the spam folder. Plus, you'll see how we generated 29 positive responses, which ended up booking us 21 calls in 21 days. So first we had to create an offer that would make people actually book calls, because our client was offering a funding offer in the financial services space, specifically around innovation, which can come off as saturated if not positioned correctly. And for this client specifically, the offer did a lot of the heavy lifting. They are a funding enablement firm, and instead of positioning their offer as, grant support, we ended up selling the outcome. And even better, we framed it as something that was performance-based, which obviously makes this a no-brainer. The trick here is obviously just positioning this correctly. Next, we had to get super clear on who we are targeting, because if you just send mass emails to a bunch of random people, you're really not going to book any qualified calls. And with this client, we narrowed it down in a few ways. Because this is a funding enablement offer in the innovation space, we wanted to find prospects that were currently working on something that was innovative. So to be able to accomplish that form of relevance, we ended up doing a few things. First, we obviously wanted to focus on those that were the decision makers. So we focused on the founders, CEOs, presidents, and really just kept it top level like that. And then when we wanted to get into the types of companies, we did a few things. So we know for a fact that California is a state that's really big on innovation. So that was one of the first types of campaigns we tried. Instead of going industry specific, we actually just did geography specific. So focusing on those companies in that region obviously helped with that. And then on the other side of things, we chose a few different industries that were specifically innovative that we'd known of. So things like biotech and a few other different industries like that. And then last, we topped it off with a headcount requirement. So as much as this is a performance-based offer and the compensation is based on, a percentage of the grant that's acquired in the end, there is an upfront cost associated with it. So we wanted to ensure that the people that we were reaching out to were actually able to afford the service. So to do that, we just strapped on a 50 plus headcount, which obviously means the businesses are established to some degree. So next thing we did was build the lead list. And nowadays people think you need to spin up some crazy 7-step AI workflow for building lead lists. But the reality is, in this case, it was almost the opposite. Because we had the offer dialed in so well, and the relevance and positioning was just there, the lead list pretty much made itself. And because we positioned the offer the right way, we were able to just stick to the basics. So here's exactly what we did. Instead of getting super complicated, and making these crazy 7-step workflows, we just jumped right into Apollo, pulled that list into Clay, as you can see here, enriched for a few different data points that we didn't have. And then we also have a kind of 2-step process where if emails weren't found in Apollo, we can then pull them from things like either TriKit and Lead Magic. Those are kind of the two that we're primarily using right now. And then as you can see here, nothing too complicated. We literally just verified in Million Verifier, enriched for a few different data points, cleaned up company names, pretty much just the standard requirements to be able to get a lead list launched and ready to go. And in the end, here you can see we had, from this list alone, 4,600 prospects. And I think we were at around a total of 7,000 once you factored in the other 2 smaller campaigns. But if you want to book calls without having to build the entire lead list yourself, you can book a meeting via the first link in the description. We've helped businesses like Relay Partners book 42 calls in just 30 days. So if you want to see if we can do the same for you, check out the link below and we'll see if we can help you out. Now, the next step was writing the email copy. And this is where people overcomplicate the process, and specifically when it comes to the subject lines. When it comes to subject lines, we honestly like to keep things simple. We literally just pick 2 or 3 subject lines that don't necessarily look like marketing material. They pique curiosity. They're very, casual, always lowercase letters, usually just some sort of question that is relevant to the offer without giving out too much information. The idea here is that you want them to have a rough idea You want them to think that it's going to be something, potentially valuable in there. And then the idea is just trying to sell the next step, which in this case is just the open. And obviously we don't track opens, but you can get a pretty good idea with a reply rate. And as you can see here, the ones that worked best for us were things like first name grant question mark, grant idea, and innovation grant. Like I said, the idea here, just keep it simple, 2 to 3 words max, question, curiosity, and so on. Then from there, if you've built out the offer and you've built out the targeting, the copy becomes the easy part. From the opening line, instead of some generic AI compliment, we wanted to lead with relevance. So in this case, we tried a few things. We tried some generic relevance where, we just said like something along the lines of, and this isn't specific, but notice the work you're doing in X space, or notice the innovation project you were working on in X space. And then we also tried a version that was more specific. So this was using AI to pull a personalization that essentially got some sort of information about the specific problems they were working on. I think in some cases it makes sense to get specific like that. It adds relevance, it makes people think that you did your homework, but in other cases it's honestly not even really worth the effort. I think if the offer is good enough, as it is in this case, realistically, the copy just kind of speaks for itself. The relevance line almost isn't super necessary because people are going to respond either way. It's super relevant, it's desirable to some degree, depending on who you're reaching out to. And because we framed it as performance-based, there's almost no reason not to say yes to what it is that they're offering. And even though the response rate wasn't crazy on this campaign, we ended up booking more than half of them on the calendar. Generally, it's a good rule of thumb to try and get, 50% of the interested leads booked into meetings. But I think in this case, we are closer to like 80%. Because when you position your copy the right way, you're able to get the right people to raise their hands. But getting in front of the right people starts with making it into the primary inbox, which brings us into the next section, which is staying out of spam. Because none of this really matters if your emails don't land where the leads will see them. So here's exactly how we set up the infrastructure. Typically, what we like to do for most clients is a split between Google and Microsoft. So on the Google side of things, we use premium inboxes. We ended up setting up roughly 40 accounts, which was 20 domains. And in this case, we were sending about 10 emails per day. And then on the Outlook side of things, we were using Mailer, which allows us to set up 99 inboxes on just one domain. In both cases, we had a fairly significant amount of volume, far more than what the initial lead list required. So this allowed us to actually create almost like a rotation strategy where we used 50% of the volume from each one and then rotate that on and off to maintain deliverability throughout the course of the campaigns. This way we had a system in place to make sure we were actually landing in the primary inbox, because that's honestly where most people mess up. And once we started sending out these emails, we had to set up follow-up sequences. And we didn't do the typical, crazy 5-step sequences that most people did. We tried to keep this short and strategic. So in this case, we enrolled every lead into a 2-step sequence and then only prioritized the follow-ups on those that were interested. So anybody who showed interest within the first 2 steps was actually brought into the next follow-up sequence, which was 4 steps following. Because the reality is if you're sending 5 emails or even more in some cases to leads that don't want what you're selling, you're just going to end up in spam, which is going to ruin the entire system for, the rest of the interested prospects that wouldn't have otherwise. Because sending 5 emails in a row to people who don't really want them in the first place is just going to get you marked as spam. So our 2-step email sequence was this. We started off with a relevant question. So this was specifically around the innovation project that they were working on and whether or not they'd leveraged, grants to be able to fund this project. And then once we get the reply, because that's realistically what we're fishing for in this case, just kickstart the conversation, then we can get into the more sales heavy, sales driven type copy, which in this case was the offer, any sort of relevant social proof. We bake in the fact that it's performance based and stuff like that to actually drive towards the meeting. And then, once we actually get the interested response, once they've shown interest in what it is that we are offering, that's when we enroll them in the follow-up sequence. We do this obviously as a means to ensure that they actually get booked on the calendar, because people get busy, things come up. They don't always just take action right away. So we don't necessarily have like a specific way of doing this, but a lot of these emails will involve, gentle reminders, relevant case studies, overcoming objections, any sort of like social proof, or just things that help people take action in this case. Obviously, it's one thing to just slam people with just following up and stuff like that, but it's another to actually keep layering value and, giving people a reason to take action in this case. But we don't just stop at sending emails. For every single interested lead that comes in, we actually enriched them for their mobile number, so our SDR could call them within 5 minutes. As you can see here, we pulled in all of their basic information like first name, last name. LinkedIn in some cases we didn't have, so we had to enrich for that. If we had it, great, it uses that version. We pull the context from the email body, so what the prospect had most recently said, that's obviously so the SDR can see that. And then here's the waterfall, so you can see it's going through a bunch of different providers to actually try and find that mobile data. It's formatting it and then making it so it's a call link. So, our SDR can easily just click the Slack notification that he receives and call that prospect right away. And with those warm calls, we actually ended up booking 8 out of 10 interested responses. As I mentioned before, like 5 out of 10 is a good metric if you're just sending emails, but you can easily see the benefit there if you decide to add calling into what you're doing as well. Now, within the span of 21 days, we sent approximately 12,000 emails, reached just about 7,000 net new prospects with a little over a 2% response rate, which ended up bringing in around 29 interested responses. And as I had mentioned, of those 29 responses, we actually booked 21 calls on the calendar for our client in this case. Now, if you want to see similar results without having to do everything yourself, you can book a call via the first link in the description. We'll refine your offer to make sure that you actually are selling something that cold traffic wants to buy. We'll build out the entire infrastructure to ensure that you're not landing in spam, and we'll be warm calling every single lead to ensure that we're maximizing the interested calls that end up on the calendar. So if that's something you're interested in, you can book a call below. Or if you want to see how I'd build an entire go-to-market strategy from scratch, you can check out this video here, and I'll see you there.